It's looking a bit aimless, really. Markets are still looking for some kind of a direction on what, this could be a flat finish. These are the headlines on Tuesday, October the 9th. Donald Trump says China is not ready for a trade deal, not yet. Now the IMF says the rest of the world could suffer. South Africa gives its revolving door of finance ministers yet another spin. And Google tries to move past its data disaster with a brand new smartphone. I'm Paula Newton, and this is Questions Business. Good evening. I know you're ready for this. Tonight, China wants a deal. Donald Trump says they'll have to stew with his tariffs just a little longer. It's been just another ordinary day, an ordinary Tuesday, really, at the White House. First, there was a warning from the International Monetary Fund. It says Mr. Trump's trade war will take a toll on the U.S. economy. Then political intrigue took over. In what was seen as a surprise move, it really surprised a lot of people. Nikki Haley said she is resigning as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And finally, President Trump brought it all full circle again. As he met with Haley in the White House, he said he's at the ready, prepared to slap yet more tariffs on China.
We helped rebuild China. If we don't do that, China's not where they are right now. And that's fine with me, but we're not doing it any longer.
You promised more tariffs on China if they retaliate.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Are you going to go forward with that?
100%. If they do that, if they retaliate, what does retaliate mean? They've already retaliated. They've taken out $500 billion. I think that's the ultimate retaliation. Now, look, China wants to make a deal, and I say they're not ready yet. I just say they're not ready yet. And we've canceled a couple of meetings because I just say they're not ready to make a deal.
Okay, you get the picture there. Not ready yet. Our Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. Our Claire Sebastian is with us here in New York. Jeremy, I go first to you. A surprise, yet another one from the White House. Nikki Haley saying that she's going to resign at the end of the year. And yet, if you're her, if you put yourself in her position, this is a pretty shrewd political move at this point.
You know, it is interesting. The timing of this announcement has had a lot of head scratching, frankly, at the White House. First of all, because a number of senior White House officials were not looped in until this morning, just an hour or so before Nikki Haley stepped into the Oval Office with the president to deliver this announcement that she is resigning at the end of the year. She did, however, come to the White House last Wednesday. She was meeting with the president, and that's when I'm told she told the president of her intention to resign from her post. And it was kept very, very closely held right up until today. A rare feat in this White House, which is, of course, notorious for leaking, as you well know, Paula. But questions now is, what will Nikki Haley do next? She signaled in her letter that she plans to return, or not to return, but to head over to the private sector and perhaps make some money for her family. Sources have been telling us that that was perhaps a consideration in this move. But the timing is notable also because last week, of course, the president had this moment with Judge Kavanaugh. The day before Nikki Haley met in the Oval Office with the president was when the president had mocked Dr. Christine Blasey Ford at that rally. Our understanding was that they wanted to hold off on it at least throughout last week so that Justice Kavanaugh could get confirmed and not to overshadow that announcement. But a lot of questions still remain as to why exactly now. A lot of the thinking inside the White House had been that if Nikki Haley was going to resign, it would perhaps be after something on which she disagreed with the president, something on which the president stepped out and took a position that she really could not support. But here we're seeing something very different. She insisted it was not for personal reasons, but merely because she had put in nearly 2 years in this administration, and she felt it was time to leave.
Yeah, and certainly she was effusive in her praise there, sitting next to the president. I mean, as Jeremy just explained, that was the political intrigue, Claire. But what was top of mind for everyone during that meeting was the issue with China, the IMF weighing in and saying, look, this will hurt growth, not just in China, but in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, the IMF made itself extremely clear today. This read not just like a report on the numbers, Paula, but essentially like a rallying cry. They're saying that global growth could be trimmed this year from an original forecast of 3.9% to 3.7%. Now, that's not a disaster. It's the same that we saw last year. It's the highest since 2011. But this is a plateau, essentially. This shows that it could meaningfully slow as a result of these trade tensions. And that's because they say not only are we going to see direct impacts on the countries involved, but indirect impacts on supply chains around the world and on confidence, on business sentiment, on financial market sentiment, on all of those things that play into it.
In terms of what the IMF is saying, you know, they keep saying it's like preaching to people who are no longer listening. They say the world will be a much poorer and more dangerous place with this kind of protectionism. Did they feel as if, never mind the Trump administration, as if they're speaking to the rest of the world here and just saying, don't take the bait. If we get into this as a real trade war, we will be in trouble on global growth?
I think probably that was part of the messaging as well. They actually took the unusual step of modeling what would happen if all of the president's threats on tariffs, you know, another 267 billion of Chinese goods, tariffs on autos, and all the retaliation that comes with that. And they said if all of that came into play, that could cut about a percentage point from global growth, and that could extend into the long term. So I think, you know, we've got a situation where emerging markets are struggling. We've got problems in Europe. These countries can't afford to have yet more, trouble in their economies. So I think that's part of what the IMF was saying.
Yeah, and Jeremy, every time when we're at the White House these days, when he's getting off of an airplane, on an airplane, he talks a lot about this whole theme. In one of the speeches when he was announcing the new trade agreement with Mexico and Canada last week, he said, look, stop being babies about tariffs. Is there any doubt in your mind that the president will go through with these other tariffs on China?
No, it certainly seems so. And frankly, the deal that he was able to strike between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, this NAFTA 2.0, frankly, that has emboldened the president, because you heard him immediately after that deal was signed touting the fact that his tariffs were exactly what had led to the success of being able to broker that agreement. And he lamented the babies who had complained. Those babies, of course, most of the Republican leadership in Congress who had complained about the president's tariff, saying that it was the wrong way to proceed. But frankly, because the president was able to get that deal with Canada and Mexico using those brinksmanship tactics, I think it makes it all the more likely that the president is going to continue to stay the course, to continue to up the ante with China, because clearly he thinks those tactics will ultimately succeed. The question, though, is China the same, is dealing with China the same as dealing with Canada and Mexico? Clearly, the stakes right now appear to be much higher.
Yeah, definitely. At least that's what the IMF is saying. Our Jeremy Diamond there at the White House for us, and our Claire Sebastian here in New York. Good to see you. Now, later in the program, I'll be talking about those IMF growth forecasts with the new Nobel laureate for economics, Paul Romer. You don't want to miss that. Now, the resignations came thick and fast today, within minutes of Nikki Haley saying she wanted out. This was making a lot of news in other capitals. News from South Africa that Finance Minister Nalendra Nene was stepping down. Now, his departure had been widely rumored. We talked about it yesterday on the show. Nene drew sharp criticism last week after admitting he met members of the Gupta family, now prominent South African businessmen at the center of a long-running corruption scandal. You will remember we've talked about this many times. Okay, the finance minister's out. The South African rand, as you can imagine, fell more than 1% on the news, and it had already weakened a lot against the dollar in the past 6 months. And his successor has now been named. It's Tito Mboweni. He will take over now as finance minister. That job, though, seems to have become what we like to call here the poison chalice of South African politics. Now, this portfolio has changed hands 6 times in 5 years, apparently taking their indications from Italy on this one. The revolving door started spinning in 2014 when Pravin Gordhan left the post. He was replaced by guess who? Nene. This was, in fact, his first turn at the helm. Now, just a few months later, President Jacob Zuma gave the job to David Van Rooyen. He was a total unknown at the time, and his tenure was, in fact, very short-lived. After 4 days, Van Rooyen was forced out, and Pravin Gordhan was back in place. Malusi Gigaba saw out the last few days, though, of that Zuma administration. Now, after Zuma's downfall, Nene came back to apparently steady the ship. Eleni Giokos is in Johannesburg, has been following every detail of this. And I guess the point is, where do we go now? I mean, we were just talking about the risks and the vulnerability to emerging markets. You got that rand that hasn't been doing good things lately in the last few days and weeks. And the fact of the matter is South Africa needs foreign investment. What is the government saying now about the confidence they have in this finance minister?
Absolutely. I mean, it needs the confidence. And, you know, just watching what you just played out there, just how many changes we've seen within the finance ministry definitely does not create confidence in the Treasury. And the Treasury, of course, is the most important thing that's going to create stability within any economy. We're currently in recession. Economic growth is coming under significant pressure. You've got a volatile currency. And, of course, as you say, the emerging market scenario globally isn't exactly playing a very good role in terms of creating stability in South Africa. And then you've got the credit rating agencies as well. They're also circling. So when Nhlanhla admitted to meeting the Guptas, and it's not so much that he admitted to meeting them, it's the fact that he lied about it previously. And this is, of course, what created the big issue where he eventually had to apologize to the country last week, and then speaking to Cyril Ramaphosa in confidence earlier this week. And this is when all the rumors started coming out. And, of course, the president has to ensure that he's got a clean government, a clean cabinet, and then, of course, accepting that resignation today. Now, what's interesting here, Paula, the man that's taking over, Tito Mboweni, I'm going to ask you, how many finance ministers do you know have a song written about them?
Exactly 0.
Well, I mean, there's a song, there you go.
Wow.
Casper Nyovest, a song named Tito Mboweni that came out last year. It hit #1 within 20 minutes of being released on iTunes. They're saying that he prophesized this happening. But Tito Mboweni is an interesting guy. I mean, he was the Reserve Bank governor in South Africa for 10 years. He's a technocrat. He's known to be prudent and relatively conservative. He also worked as Labour Minister under Nelson Mandela's administration as well. So he's going to be the guy that's going to take over, and he's creating a sense of credibility in a ministry that has been plagued but with a lot of drama. So there's hope that, of course, this is going to send the right message to markets.
So everything you just told me of this guy, juxtaposed against that video, isn't giving people a lot of confidence. I mean, look at this video. I mean, it's a marvel to look at. And if it went to, it must be good. If it went to #1 that quickly. But honestly, getting down to the bottom line here, it is incumbent upon the government, no matter what this finance minister says or does now, they're pretty much stuck with him.
Exactly. I mean, look, he's got a big task ahead of him. What's interesting is that Tito Mboweni earlier this year actually said, and he tweets a lot, and this is perhaps one of the Achilles' heels and maybe one of the things that the market doesn't like that much. He does tweet a lot, and earlier this year he said he doesn't want to become finance minister, and that we shouldn't actually be rehashing people and putting in similar people in similar positions in the country, that we need fresh blood. And here we have him now as finance minister, and he's going to have this very tough job of trying to get in investments into the country, pushing policy, and it's not going to be easy, because South Africa has basically is in a situation where the country doesn't have enough money. It's got 27% unemployment. There's worries about a budget deficit, and Paula, it's not looking good. So he's going to have to pull on those purse strings very cleverly, not like that video where you see literally dollars and being thrown around in the room. He's not going to have that ease of spending money. He's going to have to be pulling back. And he actually even said in an interview a couple of weeks ago that he wants to cut back on public spending. Whether he's going to be able to implement that as finance minister will be interesting to see.
All of it will be very interesting, although I'll be willing to bet that video does not impress the credit rating the credit rating agencies. Eleni, thanks so much covering yet another.
You never know.
You never know. Eleni Jokos there covering another busy day in South Africa for us. Now, after the break, is Snap struggling to survive? An analyst report raises questions over the very future of Snapchat and new hardware and new problems for Google. European lawmakers want to hear how the company will protect its users' privacy.